Now let's go explore our best many-to-many example inside the done template, which exists around our teams structure. If we go back to our public page here about teams, we notice that we can have many teams with many team members assigned to it, and an individual team member can also be assigned to many teams. This creates a relationship scenario where each side can have many relationships to the other. The way that we allow for that to happen in the data collections is a different way than versus a one-to-one or one-to-many relationship, where we can simply include the ID of the related record on a field of one of the two collections. Let's go into how we do this. And we're going to start with looking at our teams collection. And then we're going to look at our users, and then we're going to look at a third collection that creates this relationship. Looking at our teams collection here, we can see we've got our team name, our team description. We've got our admin permissions and company permissions fields. They are their own version of a one-to-many relationship between our team collection and these two collections that we see here. But what we don't see is a relationship directly to users on these collections. If we go over to our users collection, we can see all the default things that exist for our users, their ID, login information, name, their profile picture, tier, and then their relationships to the company records as well, the same way that the team is. But we don't see a connection to the team. So there has to be a different way to connect these two records. And in a many-to-many relationship, the way that you're going to connect records in different collections is you're going to have a third collection that sits in the middle to reference the relationship that exists. So I'm going to click on our teams and users relationship collection here. And now you're going to see I've got a field to represent a user in a record, and I have a field to represent a team in this record as well. Additionally, I do still have my one-to-many relationships between this record and, again, the company ownership records. But the key part to create this many-to-many relationship is I'm pulling the ID of one of my users and I'm pulling the ID of one of my teams to say that this user is on this team. As we can see here, my same user, Josh2, is also on the Bildr team. So we've created two records in our relationship collection to indicate that Josh2 is on both the dev team and the Bildr team, and that our Bildr team, for example, over here, has both Josh2 and Josh3 on it. If we jump over into our live application, that's what we see over here. Our Bildr team has both Josh2 and Josh3 on it. And if we look at Josh2, Josh2 is on our dev team as well as the Bildr team. And that's because of this unique third collection that connects the two in this way. So now that we've shown you how the many-to-many relationship works between our users and our teams, let's go ahead and show how this setup actually looks whenever we try to create and display this relationship inside of a page inside of our studio. So we have our organized team page here. That's the page that we came from, where we're listing out our teams. And on our organized team page, we have a repeating list. A repeating list is going to get all of the team's records that the user has access to. And that repeating list row page is right here, where we actually are going to show the team that was set into this page right here for each individual one. And then inside of this, we have another repeating list that is nested. And if we go to our data binding, we're actually looking at our team's users relationship collection. And we're filtering by the current record field value of the team. So we're going to have one field that gets created for every unique relationship that exists between this specific team and any number of users.
Please stay on the line and we will be with you shortly.
Hey, this is Josh coming to you from the future after I've recorded this whole video. I wanted to interject with one nuance here that I found important because it's a very good chance you might actually choose to do this many-to-many filter in a different way more frequently. And I want to show you both ways that it can be done. The example that we just gave you is we're actually using our data binding, and we're data binding the relationship collection itself to then set into the repeating list element. And then on the repeating list element on the row page, we're actually going to look up the records from the user at that point. That can work, and the reason that we did it in this case specifically was because we also have a button on this row page that is a delete button for the relationship. By no means do you have to do that. You can have a delete button for anything, anywhere, for any type of record. But in this case, we said, hey, it would be easiest if we can just say, hey, let's delete, and then click remove from team. And if we did that, now that record was deleted. And so if I just click on this minus button, the first thing I do is step 1, I remove the user from the team, which is just showing the secondary button for the actual confirmation. And at that point, I'm deleting a current record from the team and user relationship, and I'm just grabbing the current record that's set on the page. We did this specifically because we wanted the current record to be the relationship record, so that if we deleted it, it was just a really easy thing to delete. The more common way that you are very likely to want to manipulate and find related data collections is actually going to be starting with the end collection that you want to display and filtering down by an action that we have called our filtered dataset by dataset. I'm going to do this setup really quickly for you so that you can see this. I want to go to our page binding of our row page for our team. After page binding has to run for this to work because we're going to need the current record field value of the team set to make it work correctly. So I'm going to search for an action, which is filter dataset by another dataset. And what this is an option for us to take any JSON array of data or any data collection of data, really easy to use a Bildr data collection, and filter it by another big set of data. So what I want to do is filter and start with my users, because usually when I'm doing bigger filters, I want to typically start with the big data set I want at the end. And then when I set it into a page, I'm able to know that I've got my data set, I removed the things that didn't match, I kept the things that did, and now I'm displaying that on the page. Let's go ahead and start with our users collection, and let's get all fields. We're going to do one call to go get every single user that we have. Now, what we want to do is filter the ID of the users by the ID of the user from the relationship field between this team and that user. So we're going to start with our users collection, get all the fields that we have because we're going to use those fields. And we are going to go ahead and filter this data set by the ID of that user. So we're just saying ID. Next, we want to filter it by this team users relationship collection. And what we're going to do is compare the IDs of our users to the user's ID field on this collection so that we can display the users that are actually related to this team. So we're going to choose our team and users relationship collection. In this case, we could get all fields. We could get just the ID, or really what we need is the user's ID field because that's the field that we're going to be comparing. But I'm just going to get all fields for now. We could narrow it down later if we wanted to. The other thing that we need to do here, though, is we do need to filter this data set first inside of this step because we don't want to just look at the entire team's users relationship collection. What we want is to look at the team users relationships collection that also has the team ID from the current record field value of the team that was set into this field. So we're going to go to our teams and we're going to grab the ID there. So now what we're getting is our team and user relationship collection is right here. This is actually the same setting that we have on page binding in the other setup for this. But the reason that we do it this way, one, is the data typically oftentimes will load a little bit faster, and two, the records that get directly set into that page, more often than not, you're going to want the record of the user as the current record field value of that page. Makes it easier to data bind and display a user's info instead of having to go set a record from a related data collection. In this case, it just becomes easier to use the user if that's the current record value or whichever record we are trying to relate. Usually we want that record as the current record field value. And so we're going to start with our users. We're going to say we're going to filter all the users whose ID matches all of the IDs in this data collection from this data collection's user field. So let's clarify again one more time what we just did. we said, okay, we're loading up a brand new page. I want to go get all of the users, and I'm going to start with an open set of users. The field I'm going to use to filter users out is I'm going to look at the ID field of the user. And the data set I'm going to be comparing that value against is from our team's user relationship collection. That collection is also going to be filtered by the current team of the page that we're looking at. And then to decide and figure out what field am I comparing my user ID against, I'm going to look at the user's relationship field on our relationship collection to see which ones exist in both. And the filter type I'm going to use is to keep only matches. So by saying keep only matches, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to display all of the users that matched. I could actually do the opposite. I could remove matches, but in this case, I want to keep them. And the last thing I want to make sure I do is I do want to turn this off, because let's say that there was no related users. I don't want all of the users to then survive. I actually want to filter out all of the users if there's no matching users inside this team. And so by toggling off ignore empty filter array, it's going to say if there's nothing left, then they all get kicked out because there was no matches. The final thing that we're going to do is we're going to set the value of this process into the repeating list element on the page. So we're going to do that right there. So at this point now, if we go back to this page, what we would typically do in this case, we would maybe pull off this connection. We wouldn't data bind. And the current setup that we're using is actually intentionally directing the data towards the relationship collection instead of the user. Just for this example, instead of referencing this page row right here, I'm instead going to go ahead and just reference my component individual team member page, because this is set up for individual users for their records to be set into it. So I'm just going to choose the app component individual team member page. It's right at the top there off the screen. There we go. And so now what we're going to see when we refresh is we're going to see the same users show up. We're not going to see the delete button for the record because we're not displaying that page. However, we're still going to get the users that are related to it. And again, the reason I want to hammer home why I went out of my way to come back and re-record this part to show this other method is because usually when you are going to be doing this manipulation, more often than not, in my experience, the record that you want on that page is the record of that related collection. It's not the relationship collection itself. It's actually the record of the user in this case. Or if I was going the opposite way and I wanted to look at all of the teams and I wanted to have information about the team, I want that page to have the record of the team. I don't want that page to have the record of the relationship. And so that record information is really fundamentally different, and it just makes it a bit easier to get the end result that we want if we filter the data this way as well. So let's just go ahead and demo this real quick, and I'll return you to the regularly scheduled programming of the rest of this video on data. I'm going to refresh the teams page, and now you can see we already deleted that relationship on the dev team earlier, so that's why it's gone. But you can see that I just set my users directly into this table right here. You can see under the marketing team, I can see my teams collection. And then if I just go to the repeating list page, it's just the data collection for my users and their information directly there. So let's jump back into the other example so that we walk through the same step that we have here so you understand both opportunities to do this filtering. I look forward to seeing what you do with this information so that you can decide when and if you want to choose the relationship record or the actual related record as the one that you want to display.
Thank you for holding.
This field on the repeating list is going to go ahead and bring up our at page team member row right here. So if we look at the page that's actually used in this repeating list, it's this at page team member right here. Now, one important thing to know is remember, in this case, we chose not to set the user table directly into our row page here. Instead, we've chosen to set the relationship field and collection into the row. That means we do have the information about the particular team member available to us. We have the ID because the ID of that user is stored on that record. However, we don't have the information directly about that user available to us because we only have their ID. We have to go get the other information that we want. The way that we do that is if we go to our page load action for our row here, and then we go to page binding, you can see we run this action called open page into container. In our template, we have this page called the app component individual team member page. It's basically a way to display a team member's photo and their name. And we use it throughout the application in a lot of different spots. When we open this page, we're actually going to give it a specific record. And that specific record is going to come from our users collection. And we are going to filter it by the user's ID, pulling it out of the current record field value in our teams to user relationship collection record that was set into this specific row. So we're going to look at that record and say, okay, give me the user's ID that's stored right here. Let's pull this up in our data collection. So we set this record into the row. Give me the user ID that exists right in this row. And I'm going to use that to go look up all of the information about this user right here. And when I open up this page for my individual team member page, I'm giving it all of that information about that specific user so that I can display the photo, I can display the name, and get the information I need to create the experience that I need to. So let's go demo this again. Let's just hit refresh on this page. We're going to load up our organized teams page, and we can see, again, we've got a row page for every single team that we have. Let's go ahead and open up our Project Explorer here. We'll go to our marketing team, and we can see the current record is from the team data collection. Here's the ID of that record. And then we can see the team description, all the good stuff. Now let's next go into our nested repeating list here, where we have added all of the records from our team and users relationship collection. So the collection name is our teams and users relationship, and the ID of that current record is this in this case. And if we scroll down, what we're going to find is we have a specific field that is our users field. And that's the value of the user that we want to go look up the information for. And we want to open up the next page based off of that user's information. So if we go back to this row and we hover over our Josh3 there, we can see that now we've got a current record of our users because we opened the page with a specific record that we passed into it. So it has a current record in the users collection, and it's from the ID that we passed into it. If we go to our parent in this case is going to be the user relationship field that exists on. And we can see that the ID of the users field here is going to match the ID of the user that is actually displaying as the current record on this page right here that we see. And the same thing occurs for every single page that we do here. There's a different relationship record, a different user on it. And so we're opening up this page with context of that user each and every time.